welcome everyone. Thank you for joining this morning for the webinar on the state of safeguarding across the MENA region and forging safeguarding partnerships for the Safeguarding Resource and Support Hub. My name is Alex Clark and I am the Joint Evidence Lead at RSH. So I oversee both the research and MEL components of the RSH programme and supported on the delivery of the MENA-based research that will be presented today. I will be the chair of the webinar for today, so you will see a lot of my face. As I mentioned, today's webinar will be sharing the findings of recent research to understand the state of safeguarding across civil society in the MENA region. We will start the webinar today with a brief introduction to RSH and an overview of the RSH MENA's achievements and sustainability plan, emphasising the significance of complementarity and partnerships in MENA for safeguarding. We have invited the RSH team lead, Emma Wakowu, to the webinar today as a panelist to present this information. Today, we will then hear the findings from the research that has been conducted. The MENA Hub for RSH has conducted some research in partnership with Aid MENA, and this research aimed to map the current state of safeguarding implementation across CSOs, identify challenges faced by CSOs in strengthening safeguarding, and also understand how some of those CSOs overcame challenges to implement safeguarding in the context. We will hear from the research team, who will present findings and recommendations. We have invited Sally Hafez as a panelist, who is a humanitarian health researcher and specialist at the Academy for International Development in MENA. She was heavily involved in the delivery of the research. And in addition to that, we have 5 further panelists joining us today to represent civil society organisations across the MENA region. The 5 panelists that we have joining today to share their stories will be Amjad Shawa, the director of the Palestinian Non-Governmental Organisations Network, Adel Salah, the founder of NFDHR, one of the leading humanitarian NGOs in Yemen. Hinder is the director of the protection programme at SEMA organisation. Mustafa Alakud, executive director of Hope Revival based in Gaziantep, Turkey. And Lara Habib, the accountability and PSEA coordinator at Abad Resource Centre for Gender Equality in Lebanon. Please be advised that this webinar contains content of safeguarding that some may find distressing. So be aware of that as you are joining and listening. Thank you all again for joining. And I would like to hand now to our first speaker, Emma Wakowu, who will present a little bit about the RSH MENA Hub plans for sustainability and some of the pieces on exit strategy and the complementarity. Emma, over to you.
Thanks so much, Alex. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone on the call, and thanks for joining. It's lovely to see so many different people from different research findings, and our focus remains unwavering, fostering true partnerships, empowerment and shared responsibility on safeguarding. In our collective journey towards ensuring robust safeguarding mechanisms, the unparalleled role of the local CSOs has become evident. Their on-the-ground insights, local expertise and deep community ties make CSOs the torchbearers for this mission as we look to take forward the word of safeguarding. Our vision is clear: to gradually transition leadership of these safeguarding hubs to local affiliates, entrusting them with the critical task of safeguarding. This vision is intertwined with realities, the most salient of which is the need for sustainable resources. As we work towards this handover, it's imperative that our local CSOs are not only entrusted with responsibilities, but also endowed with the necessary resources to lead effectively. With this in mind, I'd like to draw attention to a crucial aspect, a subtle yet impactful gesture of support. While we would love to see a world where safeguarding is not required, the truth remains that tangible impact often requires tangible resources. Our dedicated fundraising efforts for localising our national hubs is less about collecting funds and more about collecting investment in a safer sector. It's an invitation for each of us stakeholders in this mission to contribute not just in spirit, but in substance. As we anticipate unveiling our research today, let's stay committed to the shared vision, recognising that true partnership transcends goodwill and ventures into shared responsibility and resources. And so for the next 10 minutes, I'm going to talk you through the background to RSH, who we are, and also our plans for sustainability as we look to move forward with our safeguarding mission. So as an overview, RSH looks to support organisations in both the humanitarian and development sector to strengthen safeguarding policy and practice against sexual exploitation, abuse, and sexual harassment. We are committed to being collaborative. We're driven by the needs of less resourced civil society organisations, and we are guided by survivor-centred principles focused on contextualised products and services. The Resources Support Hub is funded by UK Aid, and it is a 5-year programme which started in 2019 and will end in November 2024. We offer a global multilingual online platform with 12 national hubs across 4 regions. I wanted to highlight what our online hub has to offer, which is available for anyone around the world, where we offer free resources for organisations of any size to be able to support their safeguarding mission. We offer a variety of tools and resources which are available in multiple languages and are contextualised to different contexts where our national hubs are operational. We offer a free and interactive safeguarding e-learning course, which consists of 5 modules. This is available in a number of languages: English, French, Arabic, Swahili, and many more. This is an opportunity for any organisation to share this with staff and any representatives of the organisation. We also offer peer learning, such as webinars like this, podcasts, blogs, and a way to engage our hubs through online sources and in different interactive manners. And finally, we have a directory of vetted safeguarding consultants who RSH have considered to be experts in different areas, and we promote the expertise of national and regional experts through this database. We would recommend that everyone takes a look at this if they are looking to strengthen their safeguarding measures, and look for consultants in their country or region who may be suitable for what they're looking to access. You may be aware that we have national hubs in our Middle East and North Africa region, which are Jordan, Yemen, and Syria. And through this, we provide direct support to civil society organisations. We also support CSOs in the wider MENA region, such as Palestine, Lebanon, Iraq, and others who get in contact. Our online hub, I wanted to highlight some achievements. So our online hub has seen over 2,800 individuals complete the e-learning module 1, which I mentioned earlier. We have over 160 tools and resources available in Arabic. And we have over 90,000 visitors from countries in the MENA region. Our hubs directly support civil society organisations in 3 areas. One is with evidence, which is why we're here to look at the research which has been undertaken. The second is through dialogue, by having conversations with organisations, with donors, with UN agencies to understand the challenges and raise the voice of civil society organisations. And finally, to directly build capacity of organisations in an independent manner in a way that we're best able to support and build organisations to strengthen policy and procedures. So with our sustainability planning, the MENA region will come to a close in February 2024. This means that the online hub will remain available for everyone. Resources will remain free and accessible. But we do need to look at a new approach to safeguarding in the region. And we want to consider what are the risks associated and how do we plan to mitigate these. Next slide, thank you. So from February 2024, I realise this says 2023, but it should say 2024, so next year, our national hubs will come to a close, which means that our regional contracts will come to an end, and our direct support to CSOs will also be ending. We will finish activities in December, so in a few months, and we will conclude our series of newsletters which have gone out to our Arabic-speaking audience. We will have an option for our subscribers to be moved to the global newsletter, and our online hub, as I mentioned, will be available. Resources will still remain free, and we will still have a support team who are able to signpost and reference to different areas of support for organisations. We have two approaches as we head towards February 2024. We are looking both at phasing out, which means that we will look to close our hubs. And we're also prioritising a phase over approach. Our phase over approach or strategy will see the continuation of the hubs through further funding, and where the hubs will look to become a locally owned model over time. So with additional funding, we are really looking at the localisation agenda, which many people are talking about at the moment. We will have an affiliate model where we will have a partner in the region to transfer knowledge and continue to support CSOs and to lead the delivery through a local entity. This will be a one-year support package to the national organisation to consider safeguarding knowledge, operational support, but also fundraising support, which we know is critical to keeping safeguarding on the table. So I hope that provides a bit of insight as to where our RSH hub is in MENA, and also our ambition for heading towards February 2024. Thank you very much for joining again, and I will hand over to the next panelist who will look more into the research which we have now concluded. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma, for that presentation. And as mentioned, we will now hand over to start thinking about the state of safeguarding across MENA region and a presentation of the recent research that's been conducted. So I'll hand over to panelist Sally Hafez, humanitarian health researcher and specialist at the Academy of International Development, who will be providing an overview of the research and the key findings. Sally, over to you.
Thank you so much, Alex, and thank you for having me. I'd like to start by thanking everyone from the research team and all the organizations that contributed to the study, to the survey, and to the interviews, and to the also big thanks to the RSH Hub team for their support during this study. As you very briefly mentioned, the aim of this study was to try to understand the state of safeguarding in the Middle East across 5 countries, try to know their experience in first kicking off safeguarding policies, how they implement that, what are the challenges that they may face when they implement that or they try to implement that, considering different aspects of procedures, practices, and organizational culture. We were also keen to understand how they overcome these challenges with a focus on contextual adaptation and how they do this in their own countries and their own contexts. And lastly, we wanted to understand how the different safeguarding landscape is different from one country to another, and how they all adapted differently in this issue. In terms of the methodology, next please. Thank you. In terms of the methodology, we have been using mixed method approach for this study. So we started by a survey which over 175 respondents responded from 144 organizations across the 5 countries. And then we followed that up with the focus group discussions and with the 5 key informant interviews to understand the specific experiences in each of the countries, and also identify case studies, which our colleagues will represent today. Looking forward to their great work and learning from their great work. Can we go to the next one, please? In terms of the key findings of the study, I think what was interesting is that we had a lot of participation. Almost 86 of these organizations that participated were national and local actors, and only 56 were representative from international organizations or regional organizations. In terms of the scale, we had almost 60 organizations that define themselves as a small-scale organizations with less than 25 employees and volunteers and staff, and 24 organizations that define themselves as medium level, medium-scale organizations. So we had different scales of organizations working with different capacities. I think one of the key findings for our study is how there is different state of maturity across safeguarding policies and process in the whole region. There have been increase in the number of organizations that adopted safeguarding policies across both humanitarian and development perspectives in the region. When we investigate that by country, we found that Jordan was consistently having the most developed safeguarding landscape in terms of policy development and also implementation. In contrast, we found less development of safeguarding systems in the civil society organizations in Yemen and Syria, which can be also attributed to the humanitarian landscape and the aid structure, where these countries had less developed civil space before the introduction of aid to these aid structure and response in these countries, which came a little bit later than Jordan. What was also very interesting is when we investigated the awareness, we found there is increasing awareness about safeguarding at the institutional level. So at this different stages, so people knew, and safeguarding officers, the management, even different people knew about safeguarding, knew that it's needed. They have a very good rationale why it's needed. However, the enforcement of these safeguarding practices is not yet consistent across the sector and across the different countries. What was interesting also is to explore that 83% of the organization that participated in the survey, they had safeguarding in place. So that's relatively a big percentage. From these organizations, about 40 organizations developed their policy in the last 2 to 5 years, and around 46 organizations developed that just in the last year or two. So very fresh, and they are still experimenting over where to put these policies, who would be the responsible, what would be the best flow, what would be the best reporting. So as we see, there are different realities. Some are very recent, just in the first year or two. Others are more mature across the line. what we also found was, and what was interesting is about the resources and how far the organization can be able to allocate resources for safeguarding, and that has been one of the main focuses and main drivers of this were donor and international financing role in this process. And when we investigated other factors and drivers, we found that this has been both an enabler of safeguarding, but in the same time will be coming also in the limitation, as we will discuss very shortly. What was also a very important driver for some countries, particularly in Syria and Yemen, was the establishment of protection of sexual exploitation and abuse networks as part of the interagency coordination networks. And that kind of network facilitated the introduction of safeguarding, facilitating training, facilitated capacity building, and also helped local organizations to develop their capacities and make these safeguarding policies more institutionalized and more embedded. Many also flagged how the partnership with international organizations led to the development and was one of the early starting point for development of safeguarding policies as a requirements of donor and key donor organizations. Going back to, please, we're still in the previous slide. Thank you. When we talk about the regional differences in terms of the maturity of safeguarding policies, we will find that the majority of organizations in Syria and Yemen developed their safeguarding policies less than 5 years ago. And that suggested that they need more support and more help with operationalizing that process within their organizations. And in terms of in the context to which organizational safeguarding policies are enforced, because the presence of safeguarding policy does not necessarily mean that they are operational and functional and enforced and implemented. So the survey finding shows that approximately 30% of the organization that participated in the survey said that some procedures of the safeguarding are enforced, while others are not fully clear or not fully enforced in their context. In comparison, we have 66% of the study of the survey respondents said that their safeguarding policy is fully enforced. So that's also something interesting. When we're keen to understand a little bit what would make a policy more informed and enforced and implemented, what would help the uptake of safeguarding practices within an organization. What came very strongly is having a dedicated resource person or focal point for safeguarding has contributed significantly to the organizations that helped to operationalize safeguarding to a big extent. When we asked that question in the survey, almost 50% of the organizations responded that they don't have a dedicated safeguarding focal point for contact, and this is usually a project-based process. And that also appeared very strongly in the recommendations, how they can help support this point, especially the role of donors in supporting the kind of capacities and financing roles of safeguarding within a project. When in terms of, and when we get to the frequency, how far the organizations get in contact and interact and exchange with the safeguarding focal point, we found that 30% of the survey respondents indicated that they meet regularly with the safeguarding focal point. They consult them in their projects. They ask them to update processes. They ask them for trainings and all of that. While the other 70% say that their contact with the safeguarding focal point is usually on ad hoc basis or when they are planning a new program, but it's not really regular or frequent interaction. When it gets to the material and resources, I think that was a very interesting point that came from the study, that almost 38% of the survey respondents said that they were not aware if materials exist within the organizations, and that was both in the cases of large-scale organizations who have lots of departments, lots of teams, and big, well-established intranet and information management system, but also within small organizations, where we assume that the sharing of knowledge and tools and materials would be much faster. So that was also interesting about how people can be connected to the materials, resources, tools, and guidelines as well. What also came very strongly as a driving factor of enforcing safeguarding policies and procedure was the role of the management and organizational leadership. And most of the case studies that we identified and good practices that came from the focus group discussions and the interviews were met with an organizational leadership that were putting safeguarding and prioritizing safeguarding despite the various challenges and barriers that we will go through. Next, please. Thank you. In terms of the gaps and challenges, I think issues of funding and availability of technical guidance have been the most consistent reported barriers across most of the countries. As per the survey, but also as per the focus group discussion and the interviews. So that was also important. Many of the organizations that we talked to said how the appointment of a safeguarding person in a project that does not focus on protection or safeguarding would usually not be accepted by the donor or funding agencies. So this has been one of the commonly reported barriers for many of the organizations. They also reported additional barriers other than the limited financial resources, particularly in terms of employing dedicated safeguarding resource person, having people with this capacity to work within their context who are familiar with safeguarding, but also familiar with the existing guidelines and tools and state of evidence about how to best support safeguarding in their country and contextualize that. There were also challenges in terms of scarce allocations of resources for trainings, for knowledge exchange in safeguarding, especially for larger teams and for teams who do not really work in protection as focus of their projects. In terms of the staffing and the capacities and availability of technical expertise, that also came very strongly, particularly with availability of technical guidance and tools in Arabic. And many here referred to that there might be some technical guidance and tools that are produced in Arabic, but they were not fully contextualized, particularly in terms of the legal landscape to their countries. So, and how they can be reporting, how can be referred to investigation mechanisms. These were among the key gaps that were identified as well. So what was missing, not only translation and word-to-word translation, but more of in-depth contextualization here, as many reported. I highly encourage you to go to the study that the colleagues here shared the link for the study in the chat, and go into depth to the gaps and challenges that we identified, because many of these are very insightful, particularly in terms of the legal system, legal structure, and security landscape. We understand that many of the organizations operate in a very contested and fragile context where safeguarding can be politicized and can be also challenging to work around. Next, please. And to conclude, with our recommendations for donor and international actors to always consider the contextual support and interventions for local realities and how these translated into action, but also to support core safeguarding costs and adequate financing, so local organizations in particular would be able to support these functions, in addition to support tailored capacity building opportunities and trainings. What was also particularly important for international organizations is to decentralize safeguarding functions, particularly investigation, so that make this process more accountable, but also more faster for the communities and survivors as well. In terms of recommendations of the protection of sexual exploitation and abuse networks, It would be important to invest in further translation and contextualization of safeguarding resources, and also foster intersectoral collaboration, knowledge sharing experiences. Many of the organizations we talked to said that we really would love to know how other organizations would do that and overcome these challenges, particularly in terms of the navigating security complexity, having joint trainings, having joint proposal, understand how they have a reporting system and also investigation mechanism. What came as an interesting recommendation, having inter-organization placement or secondment of safeguarding experts, so they can support organizations to further develop this and more operationalize their policies and the procedures. What was also helpful to do is to support organizations to conduct rapid assessment for safeguarding capacities, to identify their needs and the way forward as well. And lastly, to harmonize accountability approaches. In terms of the local and national organizations, I think to the whole point about prioritizing community engagement came very strongly, and I think we will learn a lot from the example and case study from Hope Revival organization that our colleague Mustafa will present shortly. And also how to strengthen organizational leadership to support and really inform safeguarding interventions. I think that point of leadership has been not very commonly articulated in some of the guidelines, but most of the respondents say that this is a big determinant of really operationalizing and giving full confidence that any incident of safeguarding will be taken seriously and will not be tolerated. So starting with organizational leadership and engaging them and making them aware and making them take ownership, full ownership of safeguarding, I think is a really important point. And that can be developed by engaging also the senior leadership in training programs, not just the field staff or the safeguarding focal points, but also the senior leadership, so they can be the championing of this of safeguarding within their organizations. It would be also important, as we collaborated and we heard from so many organizations, they have amazing experiences and amazing practices. I think it would be really important to document that and to share this further not only within their context, but also across different countries. And invest in local safeguarding resources for cultural acceptance and things that can be more adequate for the context that they work with. Yeah, and along with that, to help with conducting organizational self-assessments so they can keep being on track on where they are and where they would need to go. And some also suggested studies to examine and fully examine the national unemployment legislation, which can be a big barrier in enforcing investigation and safeguarding procedure. So that can be also one of the ways forward. I'll stop here and looking for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. A brilliant presentation of really interesting research. We're now going to take time to hand over to our 5 CSO panelists who have joined us to share stories of their experience of implementing safeguarding in the context in which they work. So I'll hand over to our first panelist representing Hope Revival. So Mustafa Alakoud, who's going to share the experience of Hope Revival in relation to their safeguarding. So I think next slide, thank you.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar. I am Mustafa Alakoud, Executive Director at Hope Revival Organization, and I'm excited to be here with you today. I'm here to tell you about our success stories with our mobile application, SARA, which stands for Self-Training Awareness Raising. SARA app helps people in Northwest Syria access information and services on SIA topic with a certificate at the end of the micro-training. We developed SARA app in response to the challenges faced by people in Northwest Syria, who often have limited access to resources and references. With the support of the SIA network of Syria Northwest and the partnership with IOM, we were able to bring this innovative project to life. The rationale for developing a mobile application for SIA in Syria, the lack of safeguarding resources and conservation nature of Syrian society make it difficult to discuss topic-related women and situations. This project has successfully addressed these challenges by developing culturally sensitive material that provide content in simplified and appealing manner. In addition, the project has merged various terms and jargon related to SIA, which has helped to unify, standardize key messages and outcomes. Based on the success of this project, I believe the mobile application would be a valuable tool for safeguarding women and girls in Syria. The app could provide users with the access to critical information and resources such as definition of SIA, information on signs and symptoms of abuse, resources for reporting abuse, support services for victims of abuse. The app could be used to raise awareness of SIA issues and promote culture of safety and respect for all people. SARA app is a mobile application that provides users with the access to contextualized self-training and self-awareness on protection from sexual and exploitation and abuse. It's available on Google Play in Arabic, English, and Kurdish. SARA app is also features a complaint channel that is linked to SIA networks for whole of Syria interagency call center and provide users with access to the most up-to-date SIA material and tools. Most useful feature of SARA app is provide user with access to SIA information and resources in a way that accessible, confidential, and convenient. SARA app is especially useful to people living in conflict-affected settings where access to SIA information and resources may be limited. Here are some specific ways that SARA app can be used. Individual can use SARA app to learn more about SIA, identifying the sign and symptom of the abuse, and access resources for reporting abuse and getting support. Organizations too can use SARA app to train their staff on SIA and promote a cultural and safety respect for all people. The researchers can use SARA app to collect data and SIA experience and identify area where further intervention are needed. The success of SARA app can be best proved through the following figures. About 9,000 humanitarian workers have used the app since 2021, including 3,500 females. 29 organizations, including voluntary teams and women-led organizations, depend on SARA app for their training now. These figures demonstrate that SARA app is a valuable tool to safeguarding women and girls and promoting cultural of safety and respect for all people in the humanitarian sector. The fact that so many organizations are using the app for their training shows that it is effective and easy to use. Additionally, the fact that the app has been used by such large number of humanitarian workers, including significant number of women, shows that is meeting the real need in the sector. Finally, SARA app is successful stories demonstrate the power of technology to make a positive impact on the life of people in need. Finally, thank you a lot for listening and for your time.
Thank you, Mustafa, for that presentation and for sharing the SARA app. There are some questions, Mustafa, coming in the chat and the Q&A about the apps that you may be able to answer. Before I hand over to the next CSO panelist, I would just like to remind those participants that if you would like to ask any questions, please do post those either in the chat or the Q&A function. I can see that there is one raised hand, and we aren't able to take questions and allow people off mute. So please do post them in the chat. With that said, thank you again, Mustafa, and I will hand over to our next CSO speaker, Representative Adel Saleh from NFDHR. So next slide, please. Adel, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Great to be with you. I'm really happy to present our case study in NFDHR. And I will just start with, I had a meeting with one of the major donors the last year, and they were asking in this meeting, how about safeguarding? I told them, yes, we are applying safeguarding and things related. And they were asking, are there any cases related to safeguarding? I said, yes, of course, we are receiving a lot of complaints. I mean, there are complaints. And they were surprised. They mentioned that this is the first time we have an NGO telling us that there are safeguarding complaints and they are dealing with. This fact is just reflecting how much safeguarding is actually needed. And as a leader of NFDHR, because we have scaled our programs during 2014 to 2017 during the war in Yemen, so we had to recruit more than 1,500 staff, like part-time and full-time, in addition to thousands of volunteers working in our food distribution centers, because we were partnering with WFP, we were partnering with UNICEF, OCHA, and most of the major implementing or let's say donors that are actively working in Yemen. Recruiting this huge number in short time was actually a challenge, because we came to the time that, like, as a founder and CEO at that time, I was not able to recognize even the names of the staff in our headquarters. So it was really challenging. And every time we face like a complaint related to safeguarding, we were really wondering what is the best procedure and how to do it. So every time we had a meeting, I felt like that was the worst, let's say, or maybe the most difficult meetings we have, the meetings that we will have to discuss a complaint related to safeguarding, because it was not clear what to do and how to address this complaint. So we had actually a lot of challenges, because we were working with I mean, at least like 1 million beneficiaries or individuals each month as one of the largest implementing partners for WFP. One of the biggest challenges we had was both like quality and accountability. And as I will also mention it, as a founder and CEO at that time, I felt like I'm accountable. So whatever happened in the field or even in our offices, I will be like the first responsible person, and we were discussing all the time what to do. The first time we were introduced to safeguarding in the right way was in 2020, and we were really happy. And I'm not just talking about myself, but I'm talking about the whole leadership team. So we were really happy that there is something called safeguarding in that way. There is procedures and there are policies. So we decided to start our 5-year strategy by putting safeguarding the heart of what we do. So we put it like one of our KPIs and one of our core KPIs for NFDHR 2020-2025 strategy. And having this safeguarding KPI, we started employing a full-time safeguarding advisor who was really active, and because she was one of the leaders of NFDHR, so she knows exactly how much we really need to apply safeguarding seriously and in full commitment. And because, you know, for us as national NGOs, it doesn't mean that we were pushed by, let's say, donors or anyone to just apply it, but it was really our need. It was a core need that we were really needed. So we developed the initial draft of the policy. We started the training materials, and of course we were just copying and pasting from all other active NGOs like Oxfam, Save the Children, War Child UK, and many other resources. But of course they were not really the best materials in terms of let's say the contextualized. Like, it was very sensitive because we knew these, I mean, we received these materials in English, but when we start to translate to Arabic, it was really not, I mean, we didn't really feel it was the best material. When we joined the Resource and Support Hub, we were happy that we really received the technical guidance we needed. So, for example, when we go back to the challenges, the case management difficulties, like we really faced, like especially when we have investigations, there were no clear procedures and responsibilities. We learned a lot, and now we really achieved a lot in terms of investigations. And I could say that, like, I feel very proud that NFDHR now, after applying safeguarding like seriously since 2020 till now, that we really provided safer recruitment procedures, and we are really implementing it on daily basis. I would be very happy that we integrated safeguarding in most of our, or if not all, I would say in most of our procedures and practices, like, for example, on IT, on media and communication and advocacy messages or procedures, including the permits and everything, the consents, everything related to communication, advocacy, so on. We applied it in our programming. We had focal points on sub offices. We have about 12 sub office, and we appointed one safeguarding focal point. We are supported by at least 3 staff, of course, as like it's just we give them tasks in addition to their main positions. They are all working together with the safeguarding advisor to make sure that we are following up on daily basis all the cases, and also we are conducting online and offline trainings on regular basis for all the staff. So we achieved a lot during the last 3 years. One of the challenges that we were facing is that I feel like safeguarding is something like difficult to understand. So it's not easy to just talk about safeguarding in Arabic and people they can recognize. I remember this is the same challenge that we had when we were talking about gender. So safeguarding is like mixing it with protection was one of the challenges, and it was really difficult to present it in the beginning, but like by sending clear messaging, like training the staff on regular basis, responding to their questions, it become more clear for all the staff what it means, and that when we talk protection, it's different thing than safeguarding, and how to apply it in our programming. Talking to the local authorities was also the main challenge. I would say it was a core challenge because if we implement, let's say, protection programming, we need a lot of permits. Of course, we need a lot of permits for everything, but for protection, it would be really difficult. And when we talk about safeguarding, then it's like another layer of difficulties and permits. But we manage because, of course, it takes time sometimes to get these permits, but by time we succeeded to make sure that this is done on the field, especially training the beneficiaries or training the staff on the field and so on. The staff accountability, like the follow-up of the staff was really important. So, for example, if the local staff, like in I mean, I talk about our staff. I mean, if the field staff and the officers and managers in our headquarters are not really seeing how serious we are and how we are serious about safeguarding, applying in our programs, they would just neglect. So I like the presentation of Sally about like the study when she insisted, like, or let's say the study was very clear that leadership is a core. Like if the leadership, or let's say if the NGO leaders are not really understanding how safeguarding is really saving them and providing a safer environment for everyone, it will be really difficult to see a clear impact. I think another challenge was a lack of role model, especially when we talk about national NGOs. Almost no one was applying safeguarding. So you cannot just visit an NGO and learn from their experience and get their, let's say, understand their policies and how they applied that. So like starting from scratch as a national NGO was a challenge, but I feel happy like when I review how much challenges we have done till now. Thank you so much for all the support we received from Resources and Support Hub. And I would also thank all our staff who were really paying a lot of attention and commitment to safeguarding. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Adel, for a really interesting presentation on your experience of mainstreaming safeguarding. If we now just move to the next slide, I'll hand over to our next CSO panelist speaker, who is Lara Habib, the Accountability and PSEH Coordinator at Abad Resource Center for Gender Equality in Lebanon, who will share a little of their experience with safeguarding. Lara, over to you.
Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you for having me today. I'm really excited to be presenting about the pool of investigators that was established by the PSEA network in Lebanon, and to also hear about the inspiring work that's being done in the region. So the interagency PSEA network in Lebanon has been operating since 2013. It currently comprises around 80 organizations, from national organizations, international, and UN agencies. So we all collaboratively work on the implementation of the PSEA network yearly work plan. We do meet on a monthly basis to exchange knowledge, expertise, best practices that aligns with global standards. The network offers several capacity building opportunities to its network members, such as PSEA Focal Point TOT and other relevant trainings. And we also, the network does coordinate with organizations currently implementing PSEA activities, such as community awareness trainings, frontliner trainings, community consultations, in order to have a unified and harmonized approach and to avoid any duplications of efforts. Lebanon is a high-risk environment for SEA due to its ongoing economic crisis, increase in poverty, and the political instability. These factors increases the vulnerability of the diverse population groups that are currently residing in Lebanon, making them increasingly reliant on aid, and also hence increasing the SEA risks. Similar to other countries, we do face a lot of challenges when it comes to the low reporting of sexual exploitation and abuse allegations due to several factors, such as the fear of reporting, the overall stigma around the topic, the lack of trust in a transparent process and a clear process, or lack of access to clear reporting, complaint feedback and response mechanism channels. We have come a long way when it comes to increasing community sensitization around the topic. More so, a lot of organizations are taking sexual exploitation and abuse and safeguarding in general more seriously by developing and strengthening their internal policies and procedures to prevent and respond to sexual exploitation and abuse. The PSEA network in Lebanon have developed several resources to help and support organizations like the PSEA network SOP, the PSEA minimum standards for contractors and subcontractors, and the newly developed and updated PSEA IEC materials that are accessible to any organizations to adapt and tailor based on their personal reporting channels. But still, one of the main challenges when it comes to responding to sexual exploitation and abuse is the lack in the investigation capacity, especially among national organizations. We all know how sensitive these allegations are and the importance of maintaining a survivor-centered approach throughout the investigation process. And in order to address this gap or this need, the PSEA network in Lebanon was able to develop or establish a sexual exploitation and abuse pool of investigators that is accessible to all PSEA network members. The pool of investigators comprises around 18 members. Most of them are from national NGOs and few are from international NGOs that can be deployed by the PSEA network member organizations that are needing support in investigating their SEA allegations. There are a clear SOP for the pool of investigators that entails step-by-step guide on how to engage the pool of investigators. But in more practical terms, if I am a member of the PSEA network in Lebanon and I receive an allegation, an SEA allegation, and I do not have the capacity internally to investigate it, I have the obligation first to report this allegation to the PSEA network coordinator. Once I do that, I can mention that I need support in the investigation. So the PSEA network coordinator will need to confirm that this allegation is indeed a sexual exploitation and abuse allegation and does not fall under other types of sexual violence or sexual harassment that are currently not under the mandate of the PSEA network. And then check if there are sufficient information to start an investigation. With that, the PSEA network coordinator would then send a notification to the pool of investigators, and the profiles of the first 3 available investigators will be shared with the requesting organization to choose from. Once the investigators are deployed, the logistics, the TOR, and the confidentiality agreement is definitely signed, and the process begins. The investigator would then proceed in finalizing the investigation and writing a clear investigative report with the findings and recommendations. It's important to note that the corrective actions, disciplinary actions, as well as the survivor assistance responsibility lies with the requesting organizations and not the responsibility of the PSEA network nor the investigator being deployed. The need for investigative support is high, and for sure we face several challenges, such as staff turnover and the need for continuous investment in the pool to sustain the efforts that were made so far. We really have come a long way when it comes to all of the initiatives and efforts that are being implemented and available in Lebanon currently, but we still have a long way to go, especially in the complex context that we are working in, especially when it comes to addressing the root causes of sexual exploitation and abuse, the social stigmas, and also strengthening organizational capacity and safeguarding capacities. It's really important to coordinate and exchange best practices, as PSEA is everyone's responsibility. So I would really like to end by thanking the Resource and Support Hub for providing a platform to exchange knowledge and to learn from each other. And I will be here till the end of this webinar to answer any questions, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Lara, for your presentation. I'm glad you'll be here for the Q&A at the end. Brilliant. I will move us on to our next panelist speaker, Amjad Shawa, who's the director of the Palestinian Non-Governmental Organizations Network, to share his experience. Amjad.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you. And to thank also all the audience for participating in such important event. Just to give you some remarks about the Palestinian context, as you know, we are occupied from 1967, Gaza, West Bank, and Jerusalem. During the last 16 years, Gaza mainly witnessed so many offensives, and I do remember tens of thousands of IDPs who went to different shelters where we witnessed so many complaints from women, children regarding such abuses, on sexual abuses during that time. So people were encouraged to raise their voice and to send complaints, but there was absence of real channel in order to deal with such complaints. That encouraged us as civil society organizations and UN and other agencies in order to work together, in order to put kind of platform and to design together a localized mechanism that people can reach, mainly the marginalized and vulnerable groups. Another issue that also raised during the last weeks, maybe you heard about the Palestinian women who were forced by Israeli female soldiers in Hebron to take off their clothes in front of their children. So a lot of cases that we are still receiving, and the occupation in the Palestinian context is one of serious challenges that we are facing. So we, as our colleagues there, still the norms and the cultural issues are one of the challenges that we are facing in our work. Unfortunately, humanitarian aid delivered in the occupied Palestinian territory is not free from sexual exploitation, and the few cases have shown the presence of phenomenon whose dimensions has not yet been fully addressed. For this purpose of preventing and addressing cases of sexual exploitation and abuse in the occupied Palestinian territory, the humanitarian country team, where Bingo is representing the national NGOs in, formed the OBT Protection Against Sexual and Exploitation and Abuse network to coordinate on itself and to design and operationalize of the system with the aim of preventing acts of sexual exploitation by the humanitarian employees against the affected population and address any arising case in line with the global and institutional commitments. In the OBT context, there is a problem with the low percentages of reporting on violence, including all forms of sexual violence, despite official and civil efforts to promote women's access to channels of justice, protection, and services. They noted that this was a global and a local problem. The process of monitoring cases of violence, including the various forms of sexual violence, the case could be recording in more than one place, given that there isn't a unified national system of classification, which could be fed information by all parties, and therefore obtain categorized and accurate reports according to agreeable standards. I just will talk about now about achievement as Bingo in this regard. Giving support to Bingo members to identify capacity building needs for rising awareness of women, girls, boys, and men in local communities on their rights and the standards of conduct expected of humanitarian workers, and encourage reporting and raising awareness of frontline staff. And here that I have to mention something regarding the recognition of the problem. Sometimes we have this ignorance in our community regarding if there is kind of sexual exploitation, it's an issue or not. And this is part of the things that we did through the awareness and to make people to identify and recognize that there is problems we have to deal with. Bingo, in cooperation with UNICEF, conducting TOT trainings for PSEA focal points who work in national NGOs working Gaza Strip. And in Bingo, we have now a focal point which became kind of resource person for our national NGOs to learn from. Bingo also is a leading network in promoting a zero tolerance environment against sexual exploitation and abuse and harassment through sitting and conducting various training sessions, awareness raising sessions, playing a prominent role in PSEA network, facilitating workshop and collecting endorsement of Bingo members on the standards, operating procedures for the community-based complaint mechanism in the state of Palestine. Today, over 60 NGOs have signed on the SOPs. Bingo members are now better informed about PSEA definitions, principles, policies, and procedures, reporting channel, assist assistance, and referrals. Now, PSEA meetings are conducted in English and we have Arabic translation to encourage more local representatives to attend and actively participate as part of Bingo efforts to promote localization aspects. Bingo and UNICEF led a mapping of Bingo PSEA capacities in response to the growing demand of donors for partners to meet PSEA global standards. Bingo carried the assessment of 41 Bingo members. Bingo supports and also the national NGOs in building their own complaint mechanism and systems by using the Bingo complaint system management manual. Number of workshops was implemented to improve Bingo members' capacities in managing the complaint system in their organization. The manual contains a chapter tackling PSEA complaint mechanism. Bingo also developed a code of conduct for safeguarding and PSEA and safeguarding policy, which is applicable to applied by national NGOs. The PSEA's network in Palestine in the coming 18 months will be chaired by national NGOs. This is part of the localization effort that we had along the years. A dialogue with authorities in Gaza regarding to make them more having recognition of the issue of sexual exploitation with the local councils and with different actors in the humanitarian and development. So we have this important dialogue, which we hope that we can lead to reach the adaptation of these authorities to have their own also guidelines and safeguarding policies. So many thanks, and really it was a very good learning forum for me to learn from the other context that we can improve our work on such issue. We will not lose the hope, although that challenges that we have from the occupation, from the division, from the absence of political horizon, but we're still struggling to have such safeguarding and to apply it on all developmental and the humanitarian actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Amjad, for your presentation and your lessons learned. It's very useful. I'll move us on to our final panelist for the day. We have Hinder Ghassan, who is the Director of the Protection Programme at CEMA organisation, who will come to share some of their experiences.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alex, and thank you very much for giving me the chance to share with you some highlights of the safeguarding journey in Northwest Syria. Actually, in 2016, there's this terminology being raised and mentioned in our response. And the cases being presented at that time, it was shocking for everyone because the concept of SIA was completely absent in our response. In 2018, IOM took a big step towards establishing the PSEA network back then. And actually, this good practice helped us a lot in addressing a lot of challenges and bring a collective efforts from all organizations working under the umbrella in order to enhance safeguarding. And I may have highlight some of the key achievements of the PSEA network in Northwest Syria. Actually, this network worked very hard to raise a lot of capacity building initiatives and training and encourage all its members to have a PSEA focal point, and they provided them with TOT. Also, they provided a standardized training materials for all organizations and give the members an access for all platforms and references and materials for trainings and for tools, including the tools of resource support hub. Also, I can mention that the network secured funding for projects for creative ideas such as SARA, mentioned by my colleague Mustafa, and other very creative projects related to safeguarding on the northwest Syria. Also, establishing a reporting and response mechanism helped a lot in having concrete and evidence-based actions for further improvement of work in the ground. The most important things from my side is developing a code of conduct, a unified one, endorsed by the DHRC and HLG members. And actually the DHRC back then, Marcus, he visited the country direct service of all organizations operating in Northwest Syria and promoted for this code of conduct, and this code of conduct now is used by all the members. Nevertheless, we need to talk about some very key challenges now. It's available in Northwest Syria, and the engagement of leadership, one of the most critical issue, and I believe it's mentioned by other colleagues. Actually, the role of the leadership is very keen, and to tone the safeguarding practices and to create the culture and the environment of safeguarding in the organization. And unfortunately, till now, we have some leaders in organization deny the existence of such incidents, claiming that it is not aligned with our culture and our background. And I believe some of the good practices being done by the Resource Hub is conducting a workshop with these leaders who were engaged in a partnership with the mentoring project, and take a commitment from these leadership to support safeguarding culture inside their organization. Another very key, and maybe being mentioned by our colleague, is the investigation capacity. For many years, we in the network claimed that we don't have the right capacity for conducting investigation, and we have a gap, and we need to bridge this gap. Finally, the PSEA network took a good step of planning for having a pool fund for investigators to replicate the experiment of our colleagues in Lebanon. And now they took the first step in they made a training for the investigators from several organizations, and they now in the stage of coaching and mentorship. And soon, as soon as possible, we will have a pool of investigators that can be they will be the investigators and be hired by all organizations under the umbrella of PSEA network. Harassment is always from the beginning of the establishment of the PSEA network was a concern for all of us. And actually, we have a collaborative advocacy from all the members to add this component to the safeguarding framework. And finally, a few months ago, they added the H to the PSEA, and now it's become a PSEA network. And workshops now is conducting with the organization under the umbrella of PSEA in order to promote for this component, because the data being collected by the PSEA network and evidence inside our organization. And I will believe that in the future we will have more intervention toward harassment in organization. Thank you very much for having me and for giving me from your time to listen to my journey in PSEA in Northwest Syria. Over.
Thank you very much, Kinder, for that presentation. I'm going to move us on quite quickly to a question and answer session. There have been lots of questions coming through both the chat and the Q&A channel. Unfortunately, we won't have time to cover them all, But I'd like to reassure you that we'll produce a question and answer document after, where we'll go through the questions and make sure we have answers for most of those. So you'll receive that after this webinar. The question that I've kind of taken, and I've clustered a few in the chat, but I would like to, we had a question early on, which I think was very interesting, and I'd like to direct that to, firstly to Mwakowu and then the CSO panelists for their reflections. And that was, what experience have you had with educating or influencing donors on how to better budget for safeguarding, if any, and please do share that. And then as a second follow-up question to the CSO panelists, what support is needed from your side, do you feel, from INGOs or donors to better support you and other civil society organisations to strengthen your safeguarding? And for that question, I'd like to pass to CSO panelists and also Sally to share reflections from the research. So over to you.
Maybe I'll start and the colleagues can complement. Thanks a lot for that. I feel the question about what works and the effectiveness, there are no silver bullet for that. They are usually a mix of a couple of factors. As we mentioned, availability of and having a dedicated safeguarding focal point or advisor or person who will be able to not just conduct trainings, but also engage with the program and project team in planning and making sure that their projects are integrating and really operationalizing safeguarding and reporting and adapting that and developing contextual safeguarding practices, but also age and gender appropriate safeguarding reporting practices. So I feel that was the most common pattern that came very closely. I would like also to respond very quickly about the point about contextualization and examples about that. I feel the most visible thing was the example that shared by my colleague about even the word contextual safeguarding is a little bit vague in Arabic, and that is one of the key barriers in terms of its understanding by different actors, but also in terms of the working with it. So both protection and safeguarding can be translated into the same word in Arabic, الحماية. The word that the hub uses, which is a son, which is some sort of safeguarding, not very commonly understood by some of the people. And when we talked to them, they said, it has been like a newly introduced, and now it's part of our current language. But when we talk to people with no knowledge of safeguarding, it's a little bit challenging we have to explain what that means before we get to them. So this is just a very small example of what contextualization means in this example. Another example of contextualization is particularly how safeguarding can influence the HR, human resources management and recruitment, and also dismissal of staff that would prove in misconduct and after conducting an investigation, and how the legal framework and the labor law in some of the countries would not acknowledge a violation of or safeguarding violation as a legitimate reason for dismissal. So that point of contextualization came very clearly in most of the interviews. Over to you, to the colleagues.
Thank you, Sally. And yes, if I could invite the panelists to turn on your cameras while we do this reflection, and I'd like to hand to you now with the question around sort of what support do you feel is needed from donors to support your CSOs and other CSOs to strengthen their safeguarding based on your experience and the challenges you face and over how you overcame them. So I don't know, Lara, Adele, I can see your cameras are on.
From my side, we've been noticing more that donors are focusing more on safeguarding whenever they are partnering with organizations. And we usually see like a checklist of documents that's required from organizations to provide to see like their safeguarding capacity. I believe like an important exercise is to like support organizations not only by providing these documents and to turn this from a checking like a checklist to a more sustainable approach by training focal points, by providing capacity building on how to actually move from having documents and words on papers to actually the implementation of these activities and to raise awareness internally. This brings to mind like an activity or an exercise that Abad implements to support organizations when it comes to strengthening their capacity. So we've actually adapted the UNIP assessment that goes over the checklist of documents that are required by organizations to have whenever they are partnering with a UN agency. And we've developed a coaching and mentoring initiative whereby we support organizations not only in developing these tools, but also by training them on different topics such as accountability, how to develop their complaint feedback and response mechanisms, how to report SEA allegations, how to refer survivors to assistance, in order to make it more sustainable and not only just focus on having these documents in place.
Thank you, Laura. I hand over to other CSO panelists.
Maybe I would just say, for us, when we started implementing safeguarding, we were able to integrate like this as a position in our projects. So it's like we put it and we budgeted for that. The challenge was is that when we like for example for the staff we could do it. But for the activities, because when you talk about training all the staff, you go to the field. I mean, suddenly you are coming up with huge budget. The challenge is that like safeguarding is like a new component. We never used it before because, like for me, I worked in many like positions before, so we know all about the budget for monitoring and evaluation, accountability, and learning. Can we just consider the safeguarding budget as part of the accountability? So it's like part of because actually we are doing, let's say, the complaints and receiving complaints, documentation, reporting things. It's like another layer which needs more confidentiality, more. It's a lot of procedures that we make sure that all the data we receive or the info we receive should be kept, and it should go through the line to focal point, the focal point to the advisor. Not everyone can share these complaints. So yeah, it needs more budgeting. We hope like donors by time they start acknowledging that safeguarding needs a percentage of the funding. Like for example, they all agree of 6% funding for monitoring and evaluation, maybe more. Can we come up to the point that we have, let's say, 3% or more for safeguarding? I don't know to what extent this is applicable, but let's hope so. Let's hope so.
Thank you so much, Adel. And unfortunately, that's all we have time for this live Q&A session. However, as I mentioned, we will be collating all of the questions in a document, and we'll share that after the webinar closes with those that were on board and online. I'll layer over some closing remarks. Firstly, I'd like to start by thanking again all of the panelists, and there's almost too many to name, for joining today and sharing their experience and insights. I think you'll all agree it was really, really interesting and helpful to see. And from the questions in the chat, it feels like this was a very relevant and timely presentation and sharing. So thank you both for the panelists and all of the participants for your engagement today. I'd like to end by kind of reiterating a point that I think Emma made very early on, that sort of having heard both these important research findings and also the experiences of the CSOs that we spoke to as part of the research, it's important for us to remain committed to a shared vision, recognising that true partnership transcends goodwill and ventures into shared responsibilities and resources. And I ask that everyone who has joined today to continue the conversation on safeguarding, to work towards our united vision of ending sexual exploitation, abuse, and sexual harassment. And I think some of the questions that were posed in the chat were asking for kind of information and feedback on how we can all, each of us as different stakeholder types, play an important role in this safeguarding ecosystem, whether you be a CSO, a PSEA network, the hub itself, or donors that work in this space. If you would like to hear more about future RSH webinars or subscribe, please do subscribe to our newsletter. And again, thank you so much for your attendance today and your active participation. We look forward to continuing this conversation with you.